If it falls to you to do the laundry, you know that after you take the clothes out of the dryer, a lot of them are inside out. You've got to flip them around. We normally don't wear clothes inside out. And of course, when things are stood on their head, we don't like that either. Upside down. I don't like getting photos on my cell phone where people send me a photo that's upside down. I have to edit it and turn it right side up so I can look at it. We're not people who like things inside out or upside down, and that is why I think people shy away from Christianity. Because the gospel preaches a world turned inside out and upside down. The main reason being that the gospel sees quite clearly that it is difficult to keep our hearts free in the midst of earthly things, possessions. And that is the point of today's gospel, known as the Sermon on the Mount, known as the 8 Beatitudes. The power of these 8 blessings becomes all the more greater if we really believe that God, in this proclamation, is speaking to us, that God is addressing you and me right here and now. What are the blessings that Jesus identifies? Poverty of spirit, meekness, mourning, hunger and thirst, persecution. In short, everything that in our culture represents weakness. Everything the world looks its nose down at. Everything that society and culture have trouble taking seriously. If we think of blessed are the poor, blessed are those who mourn, blessed are those who hunger and thirst, blessed are those who are persecuted, we have the essence of what it means to be truly blessed, to be happy. Jesus gives us the recipe. To be truly blessed in relation to what? Not necessarily the prevailing trends, but in relation to the kingdom of heaven, which has begun but has not yet come to completion. And we see this especially with persecution. In Nigeria last year, 4,000 Christians were murdered. And yet, the people there are still filled with faith. They are still filled with confidence and hope. And indeed, we see in today's gospel that those who experience persecution are called upon to rejoice. Why? Because their reward in heaven is great. Remember that the gospel preaches a world turned upside down and inside out. Today's gospel is especially so because it is about humility. Today, humility is in short supply, and humility is in short demand. Being poor in spirit, being sympathetic to the sorrows of others, being meek and merciful, being clean of heart, acknowledging our need for righteousness from God. As the Apostle Paul says in our second reading, let those who would boast, boast in the Lord, not in themselves. And all of these things, all of these attitudes which I've just mentioned are varieties of humility. And the rewards promised for living this way are great. Membership in God's kingdom, comfort, mercy, inheriting the land, becoming children of God. These are what God has promised to those who were humble way back in the Old Testament. As we heard in the words of the prophet Zechariah in our first reading. Now, humility does not mean denying that we are of any worth. Now, some people have a poor self-image, but that is not humility. Such an attitude gives no honor to God, who created us, who lovingly and carefully willed us into being. Humility, rather, is an awareness of need, an awareness of who we are in relation to God. We are not God. We are dependent upon God. We need God to help us make sense out of our earthly lives. And we need God to bring us into lasting worth and value. Humility is not a denial of our worth. It is a sense of realism about where that worth comes from. It comes from God, not from our talents, not from our abilities, not from our limited human resources. That's pretty hard to accept today. Believing that is having things inside out and upside down. So let us ask the question, is Jesus speaking to you and me right now? Because here is what he says: be humble, and you will prosper. Acknowledge your need before the Lord, and God will give you everything that you really need. So two big questions come to mind. Number one, am I humble? Do I want to be humble? How do I get there? And secondly, in what ways do I recognize my need for God? Can I identify those ways? My brothers and sisters, as we keep holy the Lord's Day, let us reflect upon these questions. May our reflections lead to greater faith and a deeper sense of God present in our lives.